It's boot cleaning day today because I'm out. I'm out seeing some friends. Thank you for joining me, by the way. It's nice to see you. I was thinking about the Victorians and all that sort of ghost hunting they sort of did in the old days. Do you remember? They used to sit round the Ouija board, didn't they? And they'd have these seances and trying to contact the dead. It always interested me that people would want to contact the dead. I don't know why the Victorians were particularly interested in that. Maybe they were more invested in their loved ones than people are today. Maybe they were more uncertain about what was happening in the afterlife. I know that people sort of always used to have this feeling you've got to keep everything in order in this life so that you have a more perfect life in the afterlife. I don't know what people actually started to think the afterlife would consist of back in the Victorian days, whether they figured that you would actually be floating on a cloud with God and his angels and all that kind of stuff. I don't know. It's an interesting conundrum. But all that, the thing that used to laugh, you see these old pictures, and of course they had to be charlatans, didn't they? They just had to be, with all this ectoplasm going everywhere. I mean, ectoplasm, what is ectoplasm at the end of the day? It seemed to me it'd be a whole load of cotton wool. And how would people actually manage to believe that this was anything other than a falsehood? I know that there were these people that would go around and try and find the charlatans, and quite right too, really. Nobody wants to see these charlatans get away with it, charge fortunes and become something they're not. There's a fantastic book called London Belongs to Me by Norman Collins, in which one of the characters, Mr. Quayle, played in the film by Alistair Sim. It's a lovely film and it's a brilliant portrayal of this charlatan who pretends that he is one of these special people with, I think he has an Indian, whatever you call it, who talks to him, a little sort of spirit chap, and he goes into these long languishing meditative, what would you call it, when you sort of go into this lapse of thing and you're unconscious for a moment, and then suddenly there's this mysterious voice, oh, and of course they've gone around, like I'm sure most of them do in this day and age, and I don't personally think any of this is true in any way. It all seems to be complete absolute hokum, and they've worked out, they've done a little bit of research, and there's those people who can do that lay reading, can't they? They can look at you, because after all we all give off so many things about ourselves, the way we hold ourselves, about how we look, about the way we dress. It's all information that tells you something about yourself, because you're projecting that probably unknowingly. We're unknowingly, with our body language, saying more about ourselves than we actually realise. And I think that's probably what these charlatans were very good at. And whilst they were good at all of this, you think it's like, to me, it's like all these organised criminals and things. If they're that good at cheating people from their money or stealing from stuff, think how good they would be if they actually set up legitimate businesses. They wouldn't have the police chasing them. They wouldn't have people behind them, wouldn't have to look over their shoulders and all of that nonsense. They would be fine. They seem to be quite clever at what they do, and being legitimate would have been more beneficial. But I suppose you see a buck, don't you? You see the money and you think, well, these people are gullible. And sometimes you do think, if people are that gullible to think that, oh yes, the spirit of old Madame Doodah is going to find what your father said, where the hidden treasure is that your dad dug in his garden somewhere, and if only Madame Doodah could actually contact the dead and tell you where it is, we're all going to be rich and we'll cut you in, Madame Doodah. But it does give fiction a lot of fun, doesn't it? I mean, you think of Madame Arcati in Blithe Spirits by Noel Coward. Terrific play and terrific portrayal. Portrayal? I'm not sure that's a word. Portrayal by a wonderful Margaret Rutherford, of course. Just getting my boots nice and shiny, as you can see, because I am out doing a bit of seancing today. No, I'm not really. I'm not really doing any seancing, but it would be fun, would it not, to go to a seance? Did you ever play with a Ouija board or make one up? I know you could buy them from various places, and then people would say, oh no, don't dabble in the black arts. And you think, oh, what black arts? It is, I mean, I think it's all complete and utter hokum, personally, as I say, but there are those people who really believe, and I wonder if it's that thing about, if the belief is there that you think it is as grim and as nasty as it is, that actually somehow, and I'm not saying that this is in any sort of magical and unusual way, but somehow you almost bring it on yourself. I mean, it's like when you get depressed and you're down, the body is naturally producing, and why this is I don't know, but it naturally produces all these toxins, I think, because of the negative thoughts, your depressive state, and you get far worse, and you sort of tumble into this black mood that doesn't seem to lift. And yet, if you can make yourself more proud and smile and have a more jolly time, I think the body then starts to get rid of those toxins. It sort of works with you, which is very nice, and I think that's an essential thing. I just need to try and pop. I don't know how I do this now. Sometimes I put it between my legs, but I can't see whether you'll be able to. You probably don't want to see that anyway. What I was trying to do is, you see them in the. I suppose you wear them, don't you? Hang on, let me put these on. See if I can wear them. You see them in the old, and they're all Victorian times, or in the 30s, or whenever it was. They used to have the boot people cleaning. Do they do that now? These boot people. There we go. Again, you can't really see it, but it doesn't really matter. You know what I'm up to. Just polishing up these shoes to make them look spick and span. So yes, and of course, the tricks that these Victorian charlatans would get up to, and I think these tricks, and I think these things go on, isn't there? There's these various churches of spirituality, which always makes me smile. And then, of course, there's that thorny subject of reincarnation. Now, I don't really know how that would work and whether it's a true thing. I know there are people who actually believe all of this, and I'm not challenging your belief or making fun of it, and I don't want people to think that. I'm just working it through in my own mind. But it is a funny old thing, isn't it, to think that you could have been a butterfly in your previous life, and then here you are as a human. And all these weird theories that say, oh, well, you work your way up the animal kingdom. I mean, that's one theory that I've heard, that you start off as like, I don't know, an amoeba or something, and then you start working your way up, and you can be, I mean, at one point you might have been a sausage dog. And I was talking to the lovely Julia about this, and I said, do you think these protégés, these young kids, especially the Chinese, because there's loads of Chinese people, in which they can play an instrument like a piano, without any hesitation whatsoever, at 3, they're there playing an amazing thing. And I said, do you think that then in their previous life, clearly they weren't an orangutan or anything, but they must have been a pianist of some note, and they're managing, and I don't know how they do this, but they're managing to increase or bring their skills with them. And you do hear about kids who have invisible friends, and they say, oh, well, these invisible friends, these are them talking to their previous people who are still spirits. I mean, I don't know, again, is that a thing? Is that something that actually happens? It's very difficult to sort of talk to a kid here and say, is that a real person? Because as far as they're concerned, with their very limited experience on this earth, they probably do. That's why they think of them as real friends and all of that. There we are. I think I've done quite well with these boots. I don't need to wear them at the moment. I just put my slippers back on, and they are all nice and shiny. Let me demonstrate. I don't know whether you can see those. So yes, that was my thought really for the day about the weird spiritual world of the Victorians, in these dark nights of winter or whenever, when they would shut the heavy velvet curtains, wouldn't they, and the oil lamps. I mean, it sort of all lends itself so well to that period, and that sort of thing gathering round in front rooms, shaking the crockery, believing in all of this, desperate to get in touch with the past. And when you think, that's quite interesting, because the Victorians, you know, they were building these churches, weren't they? There was this huge revival of building churches and becoming very God-fearing. And then there's massive, great big tombs. You know, the Georgians had them as well. And I imagine the Georgians were sort of got into this. And then the Victorians always liked to do things a little bit more bigger and grander, but more complicated and intricate and delicate, but actually messing it up a little bit. You know, the Georgians had simplicity of design and aesthetic. And then I suppose the Victorians said, well, how can we improve this? And so they got a bit more twiddly. And I think that's probably the same with all their various religious services and things like that. So there was this huge revival, it seems to me, of this interest in the spiritual and where we're going and what we're going to do. And of course, Darwin had produced his The Origin of the Species, which must have made a number of people think, well, is it just that we go and fly up, you know, to God and say, hello, God, all right, how's it going? Or is there some sort of more to it? The spirit, what does the spirit do? Where does it go? Does it inhabit other people? And the fact that these people can stand on their stage, and they still do this, and people will still go and follow them, and he'll say, is there anybody in the house who knows I'm getting the letter M? And all the hands go up. Oh yes, I've got that. Yes, I know somebody who's dead, you know, they've got to be dead, of course, with the letter M. Yes, I know someone. I'm feeling that it's, is there someone here called Malcolm? Oh yes, I mean, Malcolm, not a very popular name these days. I mean, it might be of a certain age, I suppose, but you wouldn't. Who calls their child Malcolm? They say, I named this child Malcolm. It's a lovely name. I think it's a lovely name. If you happen to be a Malcolm, it's very nice. Thank you very much for being called Malcolm. But it's, I don't know whether it's a name that people are being christened these days. But anyway, you know, Malcolm. I think there's certain names, you know, if you go back into the 30s, you'd hear things like Ethel. Nobody's naming their daughter Ethel. I named this child Ethel. Or Marge. Hello, Marge. All right, Marge. I don't suppose anybody's being called Marge anymore. But they might be, you know, little babies, little Marge. I mean, maybe these names are coming back. It'd be lovely to have them back. Little Ethel, little Sydney. My son's called Stanley, and that's a nice name. You know, and he calls himself Stan, but on his birth certificate, it's definitely Stanley. So, you know, they say that I can see, is there somebody here called Malcolm? Yes, Malcolm. Oh, yes, come up on the stage. Now, sit there, Malcolm, because somebody wants to talk to you. And you think, oh yeah, what is it? My bank manager? Is he trying to collect? No. It's somebody in spirit. In spirit. And I think to myself, look, if they're there in spirit and you're going, oh yes, he's saying Malcolm, he's talking to you now, Malcolm, I can hear him. He's like, well, ask him what his name and address is. And perhaps he's got a national insurance number. We could check him out, you know, see if he's up to date with all his payments. And where did he live? When was he born? What did he do as an occupation? It's the fact that these people, oh yes, I can. He's asked for Malcolm, but he can't tell you where this bloke lived. And presumably, if you were dead and you were able to come back, there would be certain things that you would be more able to remember than perhaps somebody who you want to warn about, you know, don't trip on the curb outside your house on a certain day because a traction engine will be coming that day and you'll get flattened. You certainly don't want, you know, you'd think that people, we all have that thing. If you're a little kid, you teach your kid, don't you? If you get lost, you know what your name is, you know what your address is and your postcode and possibly a number. Not number 6, obviously, like the prisoner, but I mean a telephone number, you know, a sensible thing. And and then the little kid, if he gets lost. And I think most people would have some, if you could come back from the dead, you'd know who you were and you could transmit that to whoever it is, these mediums. Yes, I'm getting it now. Yes, it's Mr. John Smith from 32 Acacia Avenue, in case you're asking, in Clapham High. And then you could go, was there a John Smith from 32 Acacia Avenue in Clapham High? Is there actually a 32 Acacia Avenue? And then it would be much more intriguing. I would find that more interesting, going off and going, okay, so this apparently, and he was a bank manager for 30. I mean, you don't get any of the boring ghosts, do you? They don't come back and go, well, actually, I I just worked at a supermarket stacking shelves when most of my life. That's what I did. They're all murderers, or they've been murdered, or they've done amazing things. They're not sort of just your, well, I was just a car mechanic at Quick Fit changing tyres, for 30 years. And I didn't have a very interesting life, but I collect stamps most of my time. I mean, a ghost that collects stamps, so you don't find them materialising and suddenly oh, look, stamps on the wall, stamps covering my fridge, stamps covering my front. What's going on? It's all a bit weird, this whole belief in the spiritual. Do you find that? I find that's quite unusual, but there we are. That's what I think. The world of spiritualism and the coming back from the dead, the reincarnation, it's a thorny old subject, isn't it? And we all have our own opinions on it. But my opinion is that my boots are looking lovely and shiny, and I am off now to go to a nice spiritual relaxation by a pond, in fact, in the van, and take it easy. So I hope you have a lovely day, whatever you're up to, and thank you for listening to my rambling rubbish. And no doubt there'll be more rambling rubbish very soon, as indeed there always is.